So this is an altogether different type of object from the city. This is a rather wonderful discovery, some years old now, a Roman writing tablet made out of wood. It would have had wax filling the central recess, and into the wax would have been incised the writing. Here's the original. Here's a kind of a mocked-up version with the inscription made a little bit clearer. Because when even though the wax itself very rarely survives, when we get lucky, a kind of ham-fisted scribe has pressed down hard enough that they've left the traces of their writing beneath. Kind of like that whole thing in movies with a telephone pad where you can work out who wrote on it, what on it last. And this is a very, very interesting text. The work on it, of course, done by Roger Tomlin, who's a great Roman epigraphist. And it's this incredibly important document describing the sale of a slave girl named Fortunata. Now, this immediately provides us with information about Roman London that we just didn't have before. Here's a transcription, and here's his translation. I'm not going to read it all out in detail. I'm just going to focus in on certain key features. First of all, it's written in quite a strict format. It's very much couched in legal language. There is discussion of liability. There is a discussion of the amount of money required. It's very much a sign that writing was being used in London right from the start within this kind of context of legal arrangements, of business. The same things that the City of London, of course, is quite famous for today. We can tell a little bit about where Fortunata, this slave girl, came from. She's from Gaul, so just across the Channel. So we get an impression of where slaves are coming to London from. We know how much money was spent on her. 600 denarii, silver coins. And that, to put that in a bit of context, is about 2 years' wages for a Roman soldier at the time, so that's quite a lot of money. There's this kind of interesting formulation. The girl in question is transferred in good health, and she's not warranted to be liable to wander or run away. Which is interesting, because whilst Fortunata seemingly could be trusted to kind of stay put, the archaeological finds from Roman London tell an altogether darker story about slavery in the city, and the fact that this institution really played a really big part in London's history from the very beginning. This is a find from the 19th century, but there are quite a few examples of these from the city. In fact, we found another within the last couple of weeks. These people could not be trusted not to run away, and probably lived under quite appalling conditions, with very, very little opportunity to advance themselves. But interestingly, there's also a suggestion here that that wasn't the case for all people, because if you notice who's buying Fortunata, Fortunata is being bought by a slave. In fact, she's being bought by the slave of a slave. It's a really, really complicated situation in terms of your legal status in Roman London. Some slaves did very well for themselves. These are imperial slaves, direct slaves of the emperor. They were probably quite high-ranking officials who came to the city. Fortunata, who's been, purchased for quite a lot of cash, is working for them. She's probably working under circumstances where they don't fear her running away. Other people, really altogether different. The other thing that this tablet tells us a little about, as I've mentioned, is the fact that writing is hugely important in Roman London, and it's something which really marks it out within the context of Roman Britain. Here we have in excess of 500 examples of wooden writing tablets surviving, many, many other inscriptions. An awful lot of them are to do with this whole kind of idea of commerce, of business transactions. An awful lot of it, the written texts, are to do with the Roman army. And that's precisely because writing in a society where literacy rates would have been significantly lower than they were today was really a tool of power. And things like these rather fancy metal inkwells, which have been found in a number of sites in London, I think really reflect that. And in fact, within Britain, they're quite heavily concentrated here.